Yeah, I when we got asked to do this, I said, "Of course, I want to sit and chat with Paul for an hour. That sounds amazing to me. A really special opportunity to get to talk to each other about our practices and to do that sort of in front of slash with the community is really special. So thank you for agreeing to do this, and thank you, Ben, for inviting us for this. This is special.
Right. You're going to start off?
Yeah. So Paul and I talked about how we really wanted to talk to each other more sort of fluidly and ask each other questions about our practices and just have kind of a back and forth through the first part of this. And then maybe, Ben, you can let us know when we're at the sort of 40-minute mark and we can open it up. But when we were anticipating talking to each other about like asking each other, talking to each other about our practices, the first thing that really popped up in my brain, especially in relationship to this show, is the fact that Paul went to undergrad here, which is a really kind of special and I think kind of unique experience in coming back to teach only a couple years ago. And so this question that's been kind of percolating in my brain for a little while now is, what were you making in undergrad? And sort of what does it feel like to sort of reflect back on that time when you were here making work prior to this time?
When you first posed that idea to me, I had thought that it would be easy to answer that question. But I kind of have to tell a little story in order to kind of bring it home. I don't know if you remember, Wayne, what I was making when I was here, but it was actually figurative. At that time, I was actually working with the figure. The object, the formal pieces have changed, but the content is very similar. I was still kind of probing, even then, very early on. I remember when they took us out on this hill and they gave us these old film strips. And we made this huge circle, and we stretched this film strip just across this huge field. And then they said, "These are lines." And I was just, for me, I came here, I was a young Black athlete who was injured when I went away to play football and run track. I had been in ceramics classes in high school. Suddenly, my life was upended, and I ended up in the ceramics room. And I had not, speaking of legacy, I had not heard of Alfred. And my teacher said, "Have you ever heard of Alfred?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, I think you can get in there, and I think if you get in, you should go." So we put together a portfolio, sent it in. I arrived here, and suddenly there was this thing called the art world. And that was completely new to me. You might have heard Roberto Lugo talk about how art saved his life. Well, coming to Alfred just changed my life immensely. Suddenly there was this art world, and there were all these people who just were as gaga about clay as I was. I was like, man, I just didn't know such a thing existed. And so it was just really exciting. It was just exciting. And then, again, they took us up on the hill, and then I was like, wow, I've had these kind of thoughts before, but I wouldn't share them with anyone. Just about life and, but because it's you, Nicki, I want to focus on you now. I had a hard time here, though. It was beautiful, and at the same time, it was this culture shock. And not just because I was this really young, very naive, I always talk about being an athlete because I feel like I went from being this athlete to suddenly being here. And I learned to love scholarship and reading before I came, but here it really made a difference to me. And also my kind of inner journey started here, where I recognized that I had an inner journey. That also happened here. But it got to be really intense, just really intense. I remember some conversations with Bill Perry and remember, I didn't know who anyone was. They were just my teachers. Plenty of conversations with Wayne, but I didn't make it. I left Alfred by my own choice, unbelievably, just before the middle of my senior year. Yeah, Bill Perry was going to be one of my advisors, and it was either leave or not survive. That's what it felt like for me. And I didn't really realize that there was a legacy until years later. I had left. And I go, yeah, I went there. When people would tell me, yeah, I was there. All right, I'll cut it short by saying, when I was ready to get fully back into the arts, I was looking at schools, and my partner said to me, she said, you're going to have to apply to Alfred. I said, why do you say that? She says, because that's all you ever talk about. No, I could do this. If I was at Alfred, I could do this. If I went to Alfred, they'd let me do this. Alfred has kilns this big. I can do this. I could cast cement, and I would say all these things. I would do bronze. And so that's when I did come back for the master's. And the criteria was, apply for the MFA program, because Hope, my partner, did not want to be in these parts for 2 years. We had small children. And she said, all right, apply for the MFA. If you get in, we'll figure it out. And if we don't, you still need to reboot and come and do the master's for education, because that's all you really need to teach. You just need that degree for your permanent certification. So I applied. You rejected me. But I just wanted to be at Alfred. And then I tried to and I came, and I saw Bill Perry, and I saw everybody again. And I remember Bill saying to me, he's like, you're a different person. He said, you're just a different person. And I remember it was a very challenging time for me. And it meant so much for him to kind of acknowledge what I was going through while I was here, and then to re-acknowledge it when I came back. And this time I made it through, and it was great. I tried to come back a third time. And I came and I spoke with Wayne, and Wayne said, you don't really need to come here again. Just do something that's going to be easy on your family, and you'll find your way. And I did. And anyway, I cut a long story short, but thanks for the question.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear about the sort of condensed trajectory and your sort of relationship to this place, and now being back here. I'm quite curious about your making figurative work, and maybe like how you're sort of how you think about that. I mean, you said kind of briefly just now that the content is similar, but the kind of technical or the formal work or sort of relationship is different. Do you want to talk any more about that?
Yes, and let me close out. You said, what is it like to be back now?
Yeah.
Coming back again, my partner said to me, I was like, I'm not too sure about this. Coming to Alfred. And she just reminded me of what I needed when I was here. And the whole idea was like, well, maybe you can be that for someone else. That was a lot of the decision. Again, I was struggling when I was here, still trying to figure it out. I started taking all these classes. I started doing a little Tai Chi. I started meditating. I took all these classes over there in Sidland. I remember I took this class on stylite sayings and asceticism. And I was like, how can I can't say no to anything. How is there somebody who's an ascetic? How do you even? So that's really started a major journey for me. And so I was making figurative pieces, and I'll tell you about one piece. It was a figure. I'm going to assume that that they were male, but they were on their knees with their hands extended up in the air, with their head in their hands. And I remember, again, these were just teachers for me then. But I remember Tony saying, if you told me you were going to do that without an armature, I would have told you you couldn't do it. So I started learning. I was like, okay, I have a little, fluency with the material. That started to come alive for me. But then he also said, but I don't know, I don't remember the exact words, but it was kind of, it was kind of a very aggressive act. I saw it as kind of, years ago, I just saw it as this way of trying to understand and express, how I was feeling at that time. And then I would make these other figures. Usually, I remember we had this assignment where I made this bust of myself, and it was very. The likeness was very strong and it was quite realistic, but I couldn't leave it there. I cut it up and made it into a puzzle piece, so the whole thing fit back together. But there was all that kind of anguish coming out in the work. So I was probing my inner life, and at that point, for me, art was either always a reflection of what I was going through, or somewhere I was trying to go. Best I can do.
Yeah, no, that's great. Right, an extension of your inner experience, which you said was something you only really started to explore maybe intentionally or consciously when you got here. Yeah. And it's interesting to also think about how you said you came here with this injury, right? And that in injury, the sort of understanding the limitations of your body, pushing you sort of inwards, and then exploring it through your studio practice is intense, right? But like powerful. it's a big moment to sort of consciously realize that that's possible, to kind of interrogate yourself, your internal experience, and then use the practice, use the work to explore it or try to understand what's happening. Yeah.
It was definitely a new language, that I hadn't, again, I hadn't gone inside like that through high school at all. And probably not I transferred here. Also, my first year of school, where I was running at, I wasn't thinking in those terms. And so, Alfred, it brought a lot of things out. And, but also gave me a language for it. So my work is still very much about inner development. But I guess a few years ago now, I just turned that lens away from myself and started looking out, what was going on around me in the world. And I always joke that I'm the most reluctant social justice artist I know. I would rather not make work about the ills of our society, but I can't help it. I just have to engage in that subject matter somehow. Whether I'm out there in the front lines, being part of that conversation, or through the work. And it's nevertheless, I'm sure you know, it's tough to live with that subject matter all the time. And so I think the pinch pots that I made are kind of when people ask me about the work, I go, well, I'm an artist who uses clay, by and large slabs. And people are always like, wait a minute, but we know you through the pinched work. It's like, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all. I love making the pinch pots, and I enjoy that, they are recognized. But it's kind of like Bono, U2 gets in an interview, and the interviewer says, how's this feel to have this compilation of your best music? And Bono says, well, it's not our best music, it's our greatest hits. I kind of feel like the pinch work is the greatest hits. But now the other work that I'm doing is also, getting recognized. And so I'm part of that conversation. So did I go off left field just now?
I mean, it's great. I'll take it regardless. That other work that you're referring to, would you say that the work in this show is part of that other work that's getting recognized now?
Yes. But I'm like you. I don't know if Matt remembers this conversation. So Matt has Nicki and myself, we came in together, and Matt is giving us the chair talk. And he says, man, you two have been busy. You've been out there, you're making work, you're having shows, it's really great. That'll change. But I don't think we've reeled it in yet. So like you, I have pieces that are kind of in the middle of where I'm going. So yes, I'm not through dealing with the ills of mass incarceration. It's still with us. It's still, it's still part. Speaking of a legacy, it's definitely something I grew up with. And so yes, that's still a concern for me. But now I'm trying to move towards talking about I'm using just this general idea of gravity. We think about gravity as something that holds things down in place, but actually gravity pulls things together, right? So maybe I have some scientists here who can help me. It's actually pulling things together. Like, we're pulling too. We're just not as big as the Earth. So I'm thinking about Dr. King's way of talking about. He says, "I'm so glad that our white brothers and sisters are here with us today because they realize that their destiny is inextricably linked to ours." And so this idea of gravity holding things together or being pulled together, these forces outside of ourselves that we cannot resist, that's what I'm looking at now. And I'm seeing this as something good. And so, so I'm working, and this is like Ben and Wayne have one of the first pieces. And I always joke with my students, well, you'll know more about it when you make 10. That's 10, but you'll really know more about it when you make, 25. So it's at the beginning of that whole conversation. I have one of my early pieces is there also. And that had to do with a conversation of, it's called these interfaith objects that I made. And I saw myself as making new icons, and they had to be inclusive. So there's pylons, there's Jewish incense altars, the horns of the altar, there's the cathedral. And I like the joke, who can resist a flying butt tress? So it's all these architectural elements that I brought together in that piece. But what I would bring out to the students is how tight that work is. It's just very finely crafted. And when I was moving on to the incarceration series, I don't know if you've ever been in a prison, but there's just nothing beautiful about it. And so I didn't want the glazed, I didn't want you to look at the incarceration work and ever say, oh, this is beautiful. I was trying to avoid that completely. And I remember I had to work very hard to let go of a certain type of craft. And I remember working with a student, we were raccooning them, we were high-firing the pieces, and every time it would come out and he would go, this one's good. And I'd give it the hammer and it's like, no, not there. But when I made the first one, the clay wasn't even wet. I remember I was reading Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. I was watching the movie 13th, and I just became saturated with that material. And I went in and I built the piece, and I knew, the coils were still wet. And I was like, gosh, finally, something that speaks to that, that. I've never been in. I have family and friends and just people that I've known. I had someone email me recently because of the piece of the Equal Justice Initiative. And it was a fellow who was, formerly incarcerated. And, he said, how did you get this work? You must. I was like, no, I've never been in. So thank you. I'm glad that I did justice to the experience that you had. But most of you know that I was a pastor for 10 years, and I was involved in the church all my life. And so prison ministry was something that I did a lot of. And it just became very important. Then when I was a pastor, I had my congregation become involved with visiting people, mostly our people, people of color, Black people in the I was like, we had 2 prisons that are pretty close, and we should be in there. And so it's just unbelievable what we do, what the system does to people, just being touched by the system. you're just, you're never the same. So it must be your turn. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, Nicki Green. I, I, I think the asking you a question about the legacy of thinking about asking you a question about how the legacy of Alfred has impacted your work. I thought maybe a more pertinent question might be, how has becoming a link in the legacy and being here impacted your work?
It's a nice way to articulate that. Right, because I'm part of this institution now, and though not just the work that I do, but the way that I show up has an effect on the movement, the forward movement of the school and the program. Yeah, I mean, I also very much had thought about Alfred and sort of fantasized about the possibilities at Alfred in this kind of like sort of big scale, but also big kind of like possibility way. I had always sort of I guess I've really always been seeking out spaces where I can make the work that I want to make, that I've always just sort of hustled towards the spaces that feel conducive to the work that I'm feeling excited by. And I was doing that at UC Berkeley when I was a grad student there, and then in residence, and then teaching at Cal State Long Beach, and now here at Alfred, where I'm sort of seeking out a sort of community and access to resources, but also like kind of a material knowledge that can make the studio practice feel possible, and also like allow the work to become whatever it's going to become. And so that sort of reaching has always been part of my relationship to this place, but also like all the places that I've been seeking out. And I have a really distinct memory of being in the last, months of grad school at Berkeley, which is, I would say, very non-technical. Like the social practice professors would often talk about how dematerializing their studio practice was like the best thing they ever did for their work, and how alienated I felt by that because I was so excited by and sort of challenged by and drawn to materials and haptics, like just kind of touching things. But a lot of why I went to Berkeley was because of the conceptual rigor that there were professors there that I was really excited to study with, and like write and read and discuss work with. And I remember coming out of the program and talking to a colleague of mine and saying, like, sometimes I just kind of wish I went to a program like Cal State Long Beach or like Alfred, these sort of programs that have this relationship to like deep embedded relationship to materiality and a material kind of knowledge and a material kind of interest that Berkeley really doesn't have. And this colleague was like, well, maybe you can like teach at those places. And I really like dismissed that idea that like without a sort of hyper technical background, I like wouldn't be able to kind of enter into these spaces. And I was very wrong about that. It's been really kind of important for my understanding of material, but also about sort of art making generally, to move from this space of, let's say, like kind of a dematerialized program into a material kind of focused program. And it's just really opened up sort of what's possible with the work. Yeah, and how I'm really like thinking and talking about the work. So I think that's kind of the big thing for me, is like having these really brilliant colleagues to work with. I mean, that's sort of the thing. It's like going home every night and feeling so lucky to get to work with all of these brilliant thinkers and makers and teachers, right? Like really kind of rigorous teaching, which, you know, when I think about sort of, right, legacy as this kind of forward looking thing, not this like necessarily just a sort of backwards looking thing. I think about, yeah, what it means to be a rigorous teacher, and what it means to show up in this space and like support our students in the way that we do, the way that we like try to show up for them and push their practices. Yeah, I think it's an exciting moment, I think, in the program. All of these new folks coming in and getting to come in at the same time as you and get to sort of like do this together has been really special. Yeah,
absolutely. You yeah, it's been great. Thank you. You mentioned reading and writing. You know, you have writing as part of your practice. How would you describe the role of scholarship, reading and learning in your creative practice? I know you just talked about just really having that materiality, you know, to enjoy, right? And to develop. But how does scholarship inform, you know, that particular bodily piece?
Yeah. I mean, I've been sort of one of those people who, I started at Eugene Lang at the New School in New York City, doing a psychology degree for undergrad, and was taking classes at Parsons, like sculpture classes at Parsons, because it's part of the consortium. But taking sculpture classes while studying psychology. And then I transferred to San Francisco Art Institute and was like petitioning to take extra critical theory classes while I was there. So the fact that like the studio and the seminar have always been in relationship to each other, and when one sort of becomes more present in my life, I'm like reaching for the other, because they are informing each other so much. Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for me is that like academic language or academic material has always just been about language acquisition, like learning how to think and talk about the things that I'm interested in. But the thing that I've always found really challenging, and I continue to sort of be processing, and I continue to like talk to our students about, which is also me processing it for myself, is this relationship to the scholarship that we do or the academic work that we do, and how it shows up in the studio. And that there's this instinct that I definitely had as an undergrad and as a grad student, and even like now, sometimes I'll sort of fall into this place of feeling so kind of excited about the language or the kind of theory that's being developed around these ideas that feel really central or present for me, and wanting to kind of illustrate them with the studio. Like, how do I kind of materialize this very conceptual idea? But how sort of flat that I've been sort of like grappling with, how sort of flat or how limited that makes the work. where there's so much less possibility to kind of understand the way that these ideas can expand out into the world if the comprehension of the work is completely anchored in like the illustration of an idea, and that like making things does something that verbal or textual language can't do, and letting the work sort of open up like that. And so yeah, I had a professor in grad school who would say like, you can do all of that reading, but you got to like put it, you know, when you hang up your coat at the studio door, like go put all of that reading up there too, and just go in and like make things. And you know, it'll be present in the work that you're doing regardless, because it's like here, right? Right, it's here. So yeah, to sort of like not force it or not like kind of push the scholarship too hard. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like everything. I guess I'm sort of this person who thinks about the theory that I'm reading as scholarship, but also like the TV that I'm watching as scholarship. And like, you know, it's all kind of informing how I think about how we show up in the world. Yeah, and that's something that Jack Halberstam did a lot in The Queer Art of Failure, that sort of collapsing of like kind of high elite academics and sort of like low, you know, like Pixar films as sort of speaking to queerness or speaking to kind of gender in sort of equally challenging ways, and to let them kind of be in relationship to each other.
Yeah, that was one of the some of the genius of Bell Hooks as well, able to talk about this issue from really deep primary text to the movie that just came out. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So yeah, I had a professor who used to say, you know, Paul, this is great. You talked about all that stuff, but now you got to make art out of it.
Right.
Yeah, so great.
Right. Right. And to let it be there, to not like deny that it's important, the scholarship. Right. But I think like something that's been coming up a lot for me, and more again, like with this language, like more kind of, I've been more sort of aware of this, is that sort of touching is also a way of knowing, or making is a way of knowing. And so that idea of like leaving the text at the door and going and just kind of touching materials is not a denial or a sort of letting go of the academic work, as much as it's just letting in opportunity for a different kind of knowledge seeking or kind of exploration.
Sure. Yeah. That's that saturation. Right. Yeah. Do you find that what's first? Do you ever just start making, or do you have a general idea of the direction that you want to go before you?
I mean, I think it would be really romantic. Like, I would love to be able to say that I just go in and start like pushing material around, but I don't really do that. I often have an idea of at least like a starting place, and the work always evolves as I work. But yeah, lately it's been, and it's sort of relevant to this work that's in this show. Like lately, it's as sort of simple, I guess it's not simple at all, but as sort of embodied and straightforward as like gesture or sort of movement, that like all of the images on the forms in the show are like the discrete movement of a sort of part of the body. So like sort of like a side eye, right? Like kind of like looking to the side in this kind of quick way, as being this kind of exciting place to think about embodiment and relationships and bodily safety and autonomy, I guess.
Mhm.
And so then like using like side eye as like a starting place to make work from, or like uh one of these pieces is like an image of like a body sort of like gripping books and then like dropping the books, and the idea of like like losing sort of control over holding a thing feels kind of exciting to me, and slightly like a bit of a troll because of the instinct of having like quite distinct images on like the front and back of a form. So what if the distinction is like relatively subtle but substantial in sort of what they mean or what it like sort of is speaking to?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Um
That's great. Yeah.
yeah, I mean
It's
I want to
rich. Yeah.
I want to hear about scholarship from you. I know we're probably
Yeah, but just keep going.
okay. Will you talk about scholarship in your work?
Well, you kind of have the floor.
Hmm.
Just one more piece.
Okay.
I didn't bounce this question to you.
Okay.
So it's kind of fresh. Can you talk about Talmudic studies? And how that comes into your work. That kind of that piece that I know undergirds a lot of your thinking about art making.
Yeah, Malcolm and I were just studying Talmud this afternoon together. So, um, yeah, I mean, I came to Talmud, which are volumes of Jewish like law and cultural practice. Yeah. But they're volumes of text that are both transhistorical, so being sort of debated across time by different rabbis, and collapsing both like legal articulations of the way that people can and can't move through the world or engage in their lives, but then also discussion or kind of exploring kind of cultural tradition and sort of practice and how they intersect with um, legal parameters. Um, and I came to it because I was interested in studying Jewishness more deeply as like a early 20s person, and um, I had this moment where I was like, oh, I wish that there was like a queer yeshiva that I could go to and just kind of like buckle down and study Jewish text with other queer people. And lo and behold, there is a queer yeshiva in Chicago called Svara. And so I um, found them, and they did these like summer retreats where we would go into the woods and study Talmud for like a week together. And it kind of changed my life because it gave me access to text, to Jewish text, in a way that I hadn't had it before. And ultimately, I think in a lot of ways, feel like I'm kind of kept out of because of my like queerness and transness. So to move into a space that was explicitly for queer and trans folks to engage um, this text was really powerful. But a big thing for me is that like it's all, or it's not all, but a lot of it is language. It's like sitting down and sort of analyzing words and sort of how the words show up in the text and how they're being used, but also like the origins of these words and the way they're being sort of, I was going to say manipulated, sort of like um, used very intentionally to communicate, um, is really great. It's like so nerdy and so fun to like look at every single word and to be like, well, why is this word being used but not this other word? And so a lot of the way that I like title my work or sort of like find language to talk about my work is sitting with Talmud, like passages from Talmud, and then also sitting with the dictionary and going in these sort of like dictionary rabbit holes where I'm sort of following these threads of translation and language, and then sort of stringing them together as a kind of poetics. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
We need to transition.
So we're almost already at an hour. So I think maybe it is time to open it up to everybody else. But I'm really glad you got onto that topic, because that was what I was going to ask. I was interested in. I think we could have a whole conversation just about spirituality and tradition in art is something that's hopefully going to come up in an exhibition or two. So maybe we'll organize some kind of a talk about that. That'd be really interesting. Right, we've got the first hand is up already over here. Nice and loud, please, so the YouTubes can catch it.
Both of you guys are religious, I'm assuming. How does bring it back to that? How does that affect your work?
I anticipated this question.
Wow.
I hope that my concerns about the world, that's where it comes from. That I always think of inner life and spirituality as healing, helping, and then spilling out into the world as compassion and kindness.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a big question. Yeah, maybe it's like a framework, I guess, to think about objects and the way in which people are in relationship to each other. Something that Malcolm and I were talking about today is this idea that in these sort of ancient Jewish practices, the sort of measure of a learned person is one who can argue or sort of talk around sort of a prohibition in a way that makes it's particularly around sort of cleanliness, of food. And so if you can sort of argue the legitimacy or cleanliness of something that is unclean, then that is the mark of a learned person. And so this idea that the tradition is anchored around how do we sort of creatively problem solve being in the world and being in relationship to each other is, I think, the anchor of my life and my practice. And so my relationship to religion is threaded through that in the way that my relationship to art making is threaded through that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if it wasn't coming out in the work, it would be coming out somewhere.
Yeah, of course, for sure.
There was a
Yes, here and then wait.
You discussed writing and reading as part of your art making. Do you guys engage in your own personal writing? Something that would be read, at least on your own time, or for others to read?
I mean, I do a lot of journaling, right? Writing in ways that I sort of hope that nobody's gonna sort of see that. But I think of dialogue as a really generative kind of language and sort of writing tool. And this was something that started in grad school for me, where I was feeling so fired up about the conversations I was having with my professors and my peers, and was sort of this feels like it's the work, the kind of dialogue that's happening. So why can't it just be the work? And so then all of these papers that I was producing in grad school were all transcribed and then annotated dialogue. And so then when the opportunity to be in conversation with somebody comes up, like this situation now, this feels like generating sort of ideas or working through ideas. Yeah, and so that's kind of how I think about text, is like transcribing the conversations I'm having with people and sort of giving them energy and significance. Yeah. What about you?
I definitely, I think like Nicki described, I do write about the work. Lately, I've been trying not to, I've been trying not to be in my head so much. I've been trying to, I remember Anne said something during her talk about making. And the work, I've been trying to have a general idea, and again, as you said, and just let it flow into the work and then interpret. I've been trying to work in that way, but then I always end up. But what I've been trying to write is I try to look at the pieces, and I do a little drawing of the piece, and then I'll just start making little notes about what that move might mean. And it's true. I don't want anybody to see it. So yeah.
I think Wayne had a question next. John?
Yeah, my question has to do with how to contrast, perhaps, if I can get this in the right language. Being an artist on your own, let's say. So you're in the world, you're an artist, you have a studio, you have a gallery. But in this situation, that's not the case. You are an artist within a frame that is an educational institution. So what's interesting to me is perhaps something about the frame that you've chosen to be in and how you sense the responsibility to that shifts something about your just mainlining your own I like thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? What is that? What is that contrast? Because you've chosen to be in this education frame. So how does that drive your sense of responsibility? Outside of that, you can be responsible to yourself as an artist and do the business part and whatever that means. And you both have experience doing that. But most of the time, the case is shifted where you're inside this frame of an education institution. And what you sense your responsibility to that is your responsibility to the folks that you're working with that use the word student sometimes. I think that's a pretty major responsibility. So how do you reconcile that, or how do you think that?
You said in Sika several years ago that you wanted to prove or show that there was actually a hyphen in artist teacher. And I just thought that was great. I have to thank the students here, first of all, for just the trust that they put in me and us and what I received from the students. And as Nicki said, getting in here and being around my colleagues, I feel definitely pushed. And so it's a great responsibility. It is definitely a great responsibility. And I think that work does come out of the community. I think the community does inform. If I go into grad students and I'm asking them to take a look at this and take a look at that and then take a look at this, did you consider this? I have to then go to my studio and consider all those things myself, So I think artist teacher, and I think that was one of my questions that I had written down. I used to have my teachers, answer the question, are you an artist teacher or a teaching artist? And now I don't, now I just I kind of conflate them. But I think it is a great responsibility. I think it goes back and forth very quickly. I think that we need to, I don't know, some of you are probably too young to remember Kung Fu, Grasshopper, when he was a young training Kung Fu artist, if he could snatch the pebble from his master's hand, then he was the master himself. So he got tested every once in a while. So the idea was that he always had the potential to snatch the pebble from his master's hand. And so to think about students in terms of their masters, right? And they're eventually going to snatch that pebble from your hand. That's something that always kind of stays in my head. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that teaching or sort of like stepping forward as a teacher is always this like immense responsibility, and this space in particular, right, has this very particular kind of history, this legacy, this relationship to the like studio classroom. I think what comes up for me is sort of showing up and both committing to the students, right? Like sort of being present for them, and that it's really like my job to be there and engage with them and their work, but and to sort of like push them through that engagement, but also to model a relationship between making work and teaching. That feels like an important thing. Like that feels like a responsibility to me that I don't give up. Let's say my studio practice, that yes, it sort of shifts and changes as the demands of the university shift and change, but or like my sort of role here shifts and changes, but it's a responsibility to myself, but it's also a responsibility in sort of how I show up in the world, that I am committing to the practice and letting that be kind of a present relationship.
John had the next question, I believe.
I really love that both of you had a sort of a spiritual background to you in the conversation. And it took me right to Genesis, where the guy at the very beginning of things started working with clay and sort of like got everything started. So let's say clay is the new AI. What type of education should we do for clay to give it the freedom and the possibility and the plasticity that it has to think? Should we write 10 commandments? Should we have the do's and don'ts? That type of stuff. So let's say clay is the new AI. What sort of artistic intelligence as teachers would you use to accent in you're not teaching your student anymore, you're teaching the material.
That's all you're making.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that at least right now in this moment, but I maybe just want to sort of like dog ear that, John, you were referring to it as art.
I don't think this question needs to be answered now, but this is a celebration of the possibility I see in you two teachers for your opening legacy to teaching here. And that question is a compliment to both of you, because I think you will both know how to teach clay to do what it needs to do to really be the intellectual think tank of the world.
Well, thank you, John.
Okay, so clearly this idea of 20, 20, 20 for questions is just bananas. We're already over an hour, but I don't think that anyone's losing interest yet. Have we got a couple of other questions? Anyone else gonna stick up a hand? Yes?
Okay, so I have a couple questions. I'm just gonna need one. So both of you are still exhibiting work outside of this gathering. So where does that sort of internal motivation to show work come from? Because like as a young artist, there's a lot of pressure to put your work out there and to be known and to make a name for yourself. But it seems like the two of you have kind of achieved that. So what is the internal motivation for each of you to continue exhibiting that?
So the question is, just so the cameras and everybody else can hear, is what is the motivation for continuing to sort of exhibit your work and to try to get your work out there as these people are both very successfully doing?
So I kind of have two things that I do. You know, this two practices, two genres. And the pinch forms, lately I've been using mostly to be part of fundraisers, causes, Pots for Palestine, various things like that. I've been using it like that. I haven't even tried to show them that much. I have a gallery that wants me to show them, you know, a year, but I've been using them that way. The other work, I want to be part of the conversation about change. I always think of Lauryn Hill's, one of Lauryn Hill's songs where she says, music is supposed to inspire. How come we ain't getting no higher? You know, this idea of the arch star makes me crazy. We're supposed to be, we're supposed to be changers. You know, if you're doing that kind of work, or even bringing just powerful beauty into the world. I was telling Alex, I walk by his pot regularly and I just touch it and hear it ring. You know, just I think that's what I want to be part of that conversation. I'm so pleased. One of the best placements of work for me is at the Equal Justice Initiative, where I have a set of those sales. I get emails regularly and hits on Instagram of people telling me what that work, you know, has meant to them. So that's my motivation for those pieces. And the other pieces, I'm very pleased at where they've gone, so that I get to use them in this way to support what I want to support and to give back. So yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. It's right. It's like showing work is a way to communicate. I mean, I think about an exhibition practice as a sort of outward facing part of the practice. And I think for me, there was like a moment when I decided to be visible, right? Like to turn outwards and to extend the processing that I was doing in my studio, in my body, in my home with my partner, you know, with my friends, to like also turn it sort of like outward in a much kind of broader way, and to let it just be about communicating and being sort of like part of the world. And I think that the act of sort of participating or turning outwards leads to more opportunities to communicate and participate and sort of be facing outwards. So it's like an accumulation, you know, it's like the more that you're visible, the more visible you'll be and the more opportunities you'll have to be visible. But I also think that like the turning inwards, like the inward facing part of the practice is like, it's kind of like how the work gets made, right? Like if there's not a kind of cultivating of the experience of making the work, then I think, I mean, maybe for some people it like really works to only be sort of like outward facing, but I I think it's a really important thing to value both of them as like tools for engaging your work and then engaging the world around you.
Yeah, there is this piece of, I want to solve a problem as well. It's definitely not. I used to think that I was always working up here, and then I started getting questions from students, and I realized, oh, actually, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. This is the move I'm making. That these are, I'm in there playing often. So yeah, there is this piece of this kind of self-actualization that's happening as well. So. You're right, Ben. Everyone's been so patient and
Yeah,
and
no, this is a
attentive.
fascinating
Yeah,
conversation. Some of the
yeah.
themes that have come up are very, very near and dear to my heart, and I wish we could have much longer and extended conversations. Maybe there is a way that we can kind of keep some of these conversations going forward and using the museum in that way. But I am aware that some of these people have got open studios and to finish getting ready for and so on. So please, everybody, join with me in just thanking this.
Thank you.